SWAT Kats The Radical Squadron was created by Christian and Yvonne Tremblay for Hanna-Barbera Cartoons Incorporated. Support the SWAT Kats Revolution Kickstarter by visiting swatcatsrevolution.com. And remember to buy SWAT Kats DVDs at wbshop.com. This is a SWATKats.info production.
Hello, Television's Lance Falk. I am Robert Lavoine, otherwise known as NeeKnight, and I have a few questions for you. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for not being there in person. Due to the time zone difference and working on a Saturday, it was unworkable. But I do have some questions, and want to take a moment to thank you for your part in a show that has actually changed my life. Not only is it a great show, but belonging to the fandom has led me to meet my girlfriend and other friends I look to as family. So, thank you, sir. Now, on for the questions of Nee.
Well, that's very sweet. I also just love hearing your voice. You know, it's very nice. Whenever someone says Lance instead of Lance, I really enjoy it. You know, what I realize about doing what I do is that everybody's show is somebody's favorite show. And it hits them, it's the right thing at the right time in their lives. And I'm always happy to hear something I worked on being that right thing, right place at the right time. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
We've heard tale of how you yourself, quote, broke into television, end quote. Do you have any advice for anyone who doesn't possess your gumption? For instance, I know the golden rule of not shouting out ideas you have to show people on the live stream.
Yeah, well, I wish I had a way of, if we're talking about writing, because I write and draw, if it were a question of writing, I apologize that my answer isn't very encouraging, that you need to have that right connection to write. You just need it. It's been my experience that all the writing jobs I've ever gotten have not because of my ability or lack of ability, or quality of my work. It's because I knew the right person at the right time. It's all about a connection. All the jobs I did not get as a writer, and I have applied for many, sir, were because I did not have that connection. And in some cases, I was definitely the right guy for that job, but and would have killed the assignment and done wonderful work for them, but didn't know the right person, didn't have that juice. Now, that's the writing end of it. Artistically, it's a little easier. If you're really good enough, and maybe this need doesn't apply to you directly, if you're more interested in the writing part, but I'll say to anyone listening that drawing is practice. Drawing is practice. Every single person in the world, and a lot of them say they can't draw a straight line. Every person in the world, I don't care who you are, has 100,000 terrible drawings inside of them. And the only way to get to a good one is to get the bad ones out of your system. Now, that's just a metaphor for practice, and you'll improve. And at some point, you'll be hireable. But if it's easier, rather than this vague, well, just keep drawing thing, if you mentally picture a stack of crap drawings in front of you and say, well, at the bottom one, there's a pretty good one. And the one after that's going to be okay. One after that's going to be okay. I just need to get through all these. I need to get through my bad meal before I get to dessert. And so if you think of that metaphor, it's just practice, 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 practice. Look at the things you like. Copy the things you like. Study the things you like. I certainly, my first real drawing job was, because before then I was just a tracer, basically a cleanup guy. My first real design job was on Animaniacs. And what I did when I first got that job is I went through the files for the first season of the show. I was on the second season. And I found examples of really bad work, excuse me, that was encouraging, because I thought, like, well, I can certainly play at this level. And then I found amazingly good work by another artist who was never signed his stuff, but it was such a classroom in how to do that job. that I copied everything by this one artist and hung it up around my cubicle and just studied it and thought about it and looked at it for theory and approach and whatnot and practiced drawing. And that artist, his name is Fred Gardner, who's done backgrounds and props and things. And I know Fred a little bit now, but basically my drawing is a lame version of Fred Gardner because he's just a guy that can really draw props well, among other things. And so what I'm saying is somebody breaks in, find people you really want to draw like and draw like them. Don't worry about being a copycat. Your own style will emerge naturally as you learn the fundamentals. But you can't find your own style until you kind of basically learn the basics.
I see. Nods interestingly. But before we move on, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, since I mentioned it. When you broke into television, at the time, did you have theme music playing in your head, or was it just, oh crud, please don't get caught and arrest me, oh crud?
Oh, dude, I was hearing the Mission Impossible. The original, I was really hearing it. I was climbing hand over hand in the hollow ceiling, hearing dun 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 dun, totally hearing it. And not that Tom Cruise crap, but the real Mission Impossible. Just so you know.
Witty comeback. Working as a writer on shows that you weren't the creator for, SWAT Kats being the example we seem to discuss the most, I was wondering, how much creative freedom do you receive as a writer? And were there any concepts or maybe character points you wrote that were rejected?
Well, the last one's easier, of course, when you're pitching story ideas and character ideas and doing early drafts of things. A lot of things get knocked out of play because, you're answering to a story editor or to a producer. They have different ideas. And to be fair, a clearer vision of the big picture of how all the episodes work together and what might work. And then encouraging individual aspects of your own work that will bring something fresh to the property. I can really speak with alacrity about SWAT Kats and Johnny Quest and Scooby-Doo. As far as freedom is concerned, you're given a blank page and you pitch ideas at them. They don't tell you, write this. You pitch stuff, and then that's when the input comes.
You are television's Lance Falk. It's a title well earned. But are there any other types of media that you would like to branch into? Films? Games? Musicals? You are listed on the soundtrack of Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invader.
Well, I did write a song on that. It wasn't a very good song, but that's the only royalty checks I ever get, or little bitty royalty checks every year. I am very interested in live radio theater, and I've been in a group on and off over the decades. We're doing these performances like in coffee shops and things. And that was honestly the most fun I've ever had in my life and the most freedom. And it's sort of like writing comedy and people laughing at it, but I don't have to go up and do the stand-up. But it's that immediate, amazing live gratification of having people just laugh like hell at jokes. They're in the room. There's nothing like it. I don't have any real musical aspirations. I love music, but...
In any creative field, an artist is often moving forward, trying to improve their craft and so on. How often do you yourself look back on things? Are there any works you've been a part of that make you think, oh, I wish I could go back and tell him what he's doing wrong?
I like that question a lot, Nee. I think that's common for everybody. I don't have any, if we're talking about specific episodes, I don't think I wish I hadn't done it like that. There's certain choices I made that I wish I'd been different things. I would give an example where on Johnny Quest that I wish I were more aggressive about the team I was on getting the show from the get-go rather than coming in later, cleaning up a toxic spill, which is kind of what that job amounted to. But rather going to the top of the chain of command who I knew and saying, it's going down a bad path. You really need us to do it because we're going to do a much better job, and that's a disaster. And I didn't do that. I respected the chain of command. And I strongly regret that. Probably my largest regret in life is not doing that.
As a prop designer for a great many cartoons, are there any other designs that you've made and thought, I really wish this was a real thing, or it'd be so handy?
All the time. Certain shows, there's a show called Shaolin Showdown that we design all kinds of cool magical items with properties. There was an iteration of Scooby-Doo called Be Cool Scooby-Doo that the mystery machine was like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, to make a British reference.
On to the SWAT specific questions. That's right, the main event. That's main MNNE, since we're talking about cats. Before I get into the specific episode questions, I was wondering, can I ask you what it's like to be asked about episodes you wrote 25 years ago? I know if it were me, I would not likely remember the titles, let alone the specifics.
Well, I like that show. I'm proud of that show, and it's a very significant part of my 30-something year career. So I watch them now and again and kind of refresh my brain a little bit because I like the show. So it's not a problem. I do always carry the caveat that was a long time ago, so my memory is probably not perfect on those things.
A Destructive Nature, your first episode as a writer, your Die Hard episode with some unintended interpretations. You've said in the past how you originally were going to introduce Dr. Greenbox as a new villain before it was suggested that you use Dr. Viper. How much did it help in the writing process to have a villain that already fit the bill? What did you have time to add since you weren't having to introduce a new villain?
Well, the first version with the other character was only in rough outline form, so I had not really invested a lot of time in it. And then when they said, well, why not make it Dr. Viper? It was like, oh, certainly that fits just fine. So I don't feel like it really added anything or took anything away. It just sort of streamlined things.
And on the subject of Greenbox, how often could you create a new character for the show? I know for a show like SWAT Kats you need an extensive rogues gallery, and there are a few one-shot characters, but I'm just curious as to the process. Were you told to write an episode for a returning character first, or is it more a case of have an idea for an episode followed by a quick check to see if a character already has a model sheet?
Great question. I was never dictated. I would pitch various ideas. Some had established characters, some didn't. And I made a personal rule for every time I did a reuse that I would create a new character. And if you look at the show, the split's about 50-50. But they gave me the freedom to pitch anything I wanted. I was never assigned. Nobody said, Lance, do a Metallic Cats episode or do a Dr. Viper episode.
You had plans for Rex Shard to become a reoccurring villain after Chaos and Crystal. Was there any reasons that you know of that kept him out of the rest of seasons 1 and 2? Because the concept of a power addict sounds pretty cool. Made Shard a deeper character, and seeing it was destroying him, it could have given for a good cautionary tale about abusing certain things.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would say the second season, I was sort of bogged down with the first 2 stories I did. I've mentioned elsewhere that they were problematic behind the scenes. On screen, they play fine, but behind the scenes, it was sort of like I was told to write that UFO story, and which was a Tremblay pitch, and sort of did that, and that ate up a little time. The next one ate up a little time, and it was sort of a circumstance that had me bow away from the writing because I found the process a little frustrating the second year. And then when I was brought back for my last and I think best episode, Unlikely Alloys, that was an old pitch that I had that David Stoy asked me to work up. And I was really happy to do so. And basically, we just kind of ran out of episodes for me to bring that character back. It was always in my mind to do it, but I was in no hurry to do it. And if we'd gotten into season 3, I would have probably done it like twice. And if you do the reboot, it's very high on the list of characters to do.
Firstly, thank you for that final scene in Metallurgency. What you did with Commander Farrell in this episode was powerful and gave such an important moment in the show to show what kind of man he is. In a show where the enforcers are often limited beside the SWAT Kats, you created a moment that made Farrell a real hero in my eyes. But did you ever realise how dark Dr. Hackle is in this episode? I mean, he has sentient AI, which is evil, but he is knowingly stripping them of their free will so that they can be his servants. I know Mac and Molly are the bad guys, but this is done after he's rebuilt them and brought them back online. And that's not to mention all the other things Hackle should be arrested for, even if it is with good intentions.
Hackle's a complex situation. Thanks for the nice words on Farrell. That was certainly my intention with him, is to show him with more dimension. It's I always compare him to J. Jonah Jameson on Spider-Man, and it's like there are times where J. Jonah Jameson is a very sympathetic character with a lot of with a strong moral code. Now, as far as Dr. Hackle, in my mind, he was just sort of doddering and thoughtless, and not malevolent, and he also was just sort of did not think of them as living beings, thought of them as devices. So they acted like they were alive, and they thought they were alive, but in his mind, and you can have a philosophical debate if you want, in his mind they were just gadgets.
I know the alien race in When the Strikes Moodlaw were changed from humans to be cats to keep things on brand, but was there ever any concept art of how humans would look in the start of the show, or did it never quite reach that stage?
No, that was that idea was killed right at the premise, and it's one of those things I thought was a big mistake. But they were never drawn.
Also, with Mutalaw, you've said in the past how it was named after somebody's goldfish, so I was wondering if that was the strangest place you've ever plucked a name from.
I don't know. I guess strange is a relative thing. I use puns. I use friends' names, all sorts of various inspirations. But as I may have mentioned, Mutilar and Turmoil are kind of joined at the hip as far as one should have been longer, one should have been shorter. I wrote one because I was assigned one because it was similar to the other, and I was ordered to kind of make them different as possible. But my little wink that they're both sort of the same thing is Mutilar and Turmoil are, I mentioned this, I believe, are anagrams of one another. So you flip the letters around.
Introducing a fan-favourite character, the wonderful Cry Turmoil did so much, it's strange that it shared its episode time with SWAT Kats Unplugged. Was that always the intent to do it that way, or is that a result of having to change from Feral to T-Bone?
That was always meant to be T-Bone. It was always meant to be a half hour, and then that was all part of my frustration, was being told that was an 11-minute story when I felt it wasn't, and being told it's supposed to be with T-Bone when it wasn't. So, the tail wagged the dog in that case. It's not the way I would have done it.
Also, did you have a backstory for Turmoil? Where does one get a flying doom fortress? Because when I asked, the banks say they don't do mortgages for that kind of thing.
Aren't you funny? No, I didn't really think of backstory for that character, because if I actually wrote the half hour I wanted to write, I probably would have peppered it with a little backstory. But because it was 11-minute and I just kind of wrote it under duress and a bit of anger, it sounds awful because, people like that episode, but I just kind of wanted to get it over with in a lot of ways and didn't think about it. Now, Glenn might have had backstory for her, and if I'd gotten to write a longer one, I would have written backstory for her.
For Unlikely Alloys, you used Greenbox to create Z, which I have to keep reminding myself is actually Z, not Z. Was this a case like in Destructive Nature where you planned to use somebody new but you figured you already had a scientist you could use, or was it planned from the story's concept to finally make Greenbox a villain?
That was definitely a case of reusing a character we already had deliberately. I thought, why not use him for that? Because he developed similar, like a mechanical device that kind of did a thing. So that was just a case of me learning the Dr. Viper lesson of see what toys you have and see if any of them apply to the new story.
Now, also, how does it feel having written the last finished SWAT Kats episode, not counting that clip show that was released months later? Are you pleased that it went out on quite a high?
Well, putting it that way, that Unlikely Alloy is definitely my favorite episode of my stuff, maybe the whole series, but I like a lot of what Glenn did quite a bit. I love it. But I guess there are worse last episodes to do. I did one of those on Johnny Quest called Robot Spies. I thought that was a pretty good grace note. But that's by far eclipsed by how much more I would have enjoyed continuing to make this show.
Well, thank you for your time, sir. It's been a wonderful chance to ask these questions. I'm just saddened that I wasn't here in person to ask them. But thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing what works you produce in the future. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you very much. Those were I should be afraid when I hear that. Fantastic questions, and you have a lot of style, You made me laugh. So thank you. Come back anytime, dude, and we'll talk about this. I love your questions, and thanks for loving the show. And it changed your life. So that's your quote. That's your quote. Your word, sir. So I'm not sure how that show would change someone's life, but oh yeah, you told me you meet your girlfriend and friends. That's awesome. I feel that way about Star Wars. Like, if it weren't for that movie, I wouldn't draw. I was like at 19 when I saw it. All my friends are kind of based around people I met because of that movie. So I get it, man. It's like the right thing at the right place. So bless you and thank you, and hopefully we'll hear from you again.